If you're a fan of trade rumors, which I feel like mostly everybody is, then we have some pretty exciting things to talk about today. Frank Seravalli gave some updates regarding JT Miller and a possible trade, some teams that are interested in him, and what he thinks JT Miller's value is right now. Now, before we go any further, let me just come right out and say this. I do not think the Vancouver Canucks are going to trade JT Miller, at least this season. I feel like if there were to be a trade made with JT Miller involved, that would be an off-season deal, and I'll give my reasoning as to why I feel that way a little bit later on, but first let's actually go over what Frank Seravalli had to say. He was on Sportsnet 650 Vancouver yesterday, and at first he was talking about how initially he reported that the New York Rangers expressed some interest in JT Miller, and then before listing off the 3 other teams that he heard expressed heavy interest in JT Miller, he talked about his trade value a little bit. He mentioned how Nick Foligno was traded for like a first and 2/4 last season, and basically he said he feels like JT Miller's value is somewhere in between the Foligno and, the Barclay Goodrow kind of trades and Jack Eichel. He actually said he feels like Vancouver could probably get more than just a first and a highly touted prospect. So that was said, and then the other 3 teams that he believed expressed a lot of interest in JT Miller aside from the New York Rangers were the Calgary Flames, the Boston Bruins, and the Minnesota Wild. A little bit surprised to hear the Calgary Flames name in there. I mean, JT Miller's obviously a good player, and I feel like every team would be interested in him, but it's surprising that they were one of, the 4 major teams that apparently expressed a lot of interest, because even if Vancouver was open to the idea of moving Miller, I have a really hard time believing that they would trade him to a divisional rival like the Calgary Flames, but who knows. So now let's talk about JT Miller, the player, a little bit, and why his trade value is likely incredibly high right now. Through the first 6 seasons of his NHL career with the New York Rangers, in 341 games, he put up 172 points. He then spent 2 seasons with the Tampa Bay Lightning, where he had 65 points in 94 games. And now, as a member of the Vancouver Canucks, in 161 games, he has 157 points. He's right there, around a point a game, as a member of the Vancouver Canucks. He's really taken his game and his production to a whole other level, and has went from a complimentary piece for the majority of his time with the New York Rangers and as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning to being a legit major piece for the Vancouver Canucks, and one of, if not their most important players. You can make that argument, especially this season. And another reason as to why JT Miller's trade value is likely incredibly high, and I think this, you could make the argument, is the biggest reason, is because his cap hit is just $5.25 million, which is incredibly good for the type of player that he is and what he can bring, and he's actually still signed to that cap hit through next season as well, and then after next season he'll be a UFA. He's really the perfect trade piece right now when you consider what the Vancouver Canucks gave up to bring JT Miller in, which was, I believe, a conditional first and a 3rd round pick. They would get a lot more than that if they were to trade him now, or around the trade deadline, or in the offseason. With that being said though, now let me give you my reasoning as to why I don't think the Vancouver Canucks are going to trade JT Miller at least mid-season, and why I don't think they should trade him yet if they're going to. As we all know, the Vancouver Canucks got off to an incredibly poor start to the season, and then after firing Travis Green and Jim Benning, bringing in Bruce Boudreau, they turned things around, and they're now, I believe, 1 game under 500. They're right there in the playoff race. Now, don't get me wrong, they still have a lot of ground to cover. It's definitely still an uphill climb, but they are there in the hunt. If the Canucks were to trade JT Miller anytime from now until the trade deadline, that would basically be the front office just pulling the rug out from under this current team, and I don't think that would send a very good message to the locker room. I feel like at the very least you want to let this group play the season out and see if they can complete this season turnaround, and then reassess in the offseason and pursue a JT Miller trade if that's something you want to do then. But I guess the other argument to that is if you trade him around the deadline, you're probably going to get at least a little bit more than you would get for him in the offseason, because the team trading for him, say, in the next month or so would get a season and a half and, potentially 2 playoff runs out of JT Miller before he becomes a UFA, instead of maybe just 1 season and 1 playoff run, which is what you get out of him before he becomes a UFA if you traded for him in the offseason. So there's definitely pros and cons on when they should trade JT Miller and if they should even trade him at all. It's an interesting topic for sure. I'm really intrigued to see how it plays out if the Canucks do ultimately move on from JT Miller, if they get maybe an offer that they just can't refuse. I really want to know what you guys think though, especially if you're a fan of the Vancouver Canucks, so let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What do you think the Vancouver Canucks are going to do? What do you think the Vancouver Canucks should do? Any and all of your thoughts on the JT Miller trade speculation, leave them down below, and while you're down there, if you could, please be sure to drop a like on the video. That is the best way to show your support. And if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all soon.